Hey, what's going on, guys? Max Settings here, and welcome back to another review. Once again, I want to give a huge shout out to all the support on my videos. I'm already up to 268 subscribers at the time of filming this, which I didn't expect to get that far off of 2 videos. So thanks a lot for all your support, and I look forward to bringing you some more reviews in the future. So today we are going to be taking a look at the HiFiMan Ananda. And this is an interesting one. This one to me almost seems like a forgotten headphone. There doesn't seem to be like as much talk about this headphone as some other headphones in the price point. Particularly, this seems to be less talked about than the Edition X was. And I'm not really sure why this one seems to be so forgotten. And it's actually quite good, as we'll get over to here in just a little bit. So starting things off with some specs here. So these have a frequency response of 8 to 55,000 hertz, sensitivity of 103 decibels. They weigh 399 grams, and they are obviously planar magnetic. So starting things off here with the build. So these are built better than the Edition X was. The forks here are metal. The metal headband doesn't have that old school HiFiMan headband snapping that plagued the 400i, the 560, the original style HiFiMan's HE6, HE400, 500, etc. So they finally went to an all metal build, which is nice. So no more HiFiMan plastic snapping. So headband, metal. This is the same strap that's on like the HE400i, the HE560, Edition X, Arya, stuff like that. And it's the standard HiFiMan strap. It's a little stiff, but I don't really mind it. It has this like kind of fake leather texture on the top and like a almost, I don't know if not really suede, but like a nubuck kind of material here on the bottom. Metal headband, metal forks, the same cup style that the Edition X used, and then going down to the pads, the same pads that like the Edition X V2, the HE1000, HE1000 SE, Arya uses these massive pads with this cloth material, not the velour like the HE1000 V1 or the Edition X V1. And then 3.5 millimeter on the bottom. These use either stereo or 3.5 millimeter mono. Pretty common cable. A lot of headphones have that, so you might have a cable for those. And then going over the cables real quick. So the stock cable for these headphones I've actually never used. They're still wrapped up from the factory. So these come with 2 cables. So the first one is it's a little short. I think it's like a 4 or 5 footer. I haven't even unwrapped it to measure it, but it's just a 3.5 millimeter with a 1/4 inch adapter. And then the other one, I believe, is a 10 footer, and it's just a straight up Nutrix 1/4 inch, which is quite nice because Nutrix connectors are always nice. But the reason I've never used it is it's not a good cable. It's this like plasticky rubber material, and it has like this like, I don't even know how to describe it, like a ridgy kind of texture. If you like rub your nails on it, it makes a sound. Let me see if I can get it to pick up on the mic here. It's just this terrible plasticky sound. And it's just like this clear plastic with, you can see the individual strands of wire within. You can see the silver and the red there if the camera will focus on it. And they just like float loosely in this like big hollow rubber tube. And it's not a good cable at all. This is a really bad cable. I don't know what HiFiMan's doing with this. So if you get a pair of these, I highly recommend you pick something up like this. This Periapt balance cable here. This is in a custom blue color. These are always recommended. I'll link them in the description. Not affiliated with them at all. Just really like their stuff, and like to help them out when I can. I recommend their stuff a lot. And then I also have this cable here from Norne. This is like a Litz copper with the Dolic connectors. This is a nice cable. This is expensive. This is like $150, and this Periap's only, I don't know, $65, $70, something like that. So this is the box the Ananda comes in. There's a cardboard sleeve that goes over this, just slides out. This has a diagram of the headphone. But yeah, this is a really nice box. It's not really exclusive to the Ananda. The original HE400i came in a box like this. The second generation of the 560 V1 comes in this box. The Edition X came in this box. The Arya comes in a box like this. But yeah, this is like a leatherette box with some nice stitching. It says Ananda on the front, Ananda on the top, and you know, there's a little pull tab, and it's kind of tricky to get open. Let me see if I can get it open here. Oh, there it goes. And it lifts right up, and it has a space where the headphone goes. This little hole here is where the wire goes at. And yeah, this is just a really nice box. I think it was worthwhile to mention it, especially if you're somebody that cares about the boxes. And yeah, really nice box. Really like. Good job, HiFiMan. Keep it up. And then you may have noticed that since I mentioned the little short cable, so these are actually meant to be used off like low power stuff like a phone or a DAP. Like these are actually kind of intended to be used portable, which is interesting because there actually is a Bluetooth version of these now, the Ananda BT, because they're very high efficiency and very low impedance makes them easy to drive and usable off a phone. You can absolutely run these off of a smartphone with ease, which is pretty interesting. I don't know why you would really want to take such a large planar portable, but I don't know, maybe around the house it would be nice. But yeah. And in case you didn't know, these HiFiMans, these big ones like this, these things leak like crazy. They're basically speakers. They sound almost as loud off your head as they do on, because the driver's just big, wide open, and they just blast sound out the sides. They're basically almost like speakers. You can just sit them on your desk and almost use them as speakers. They leak so much sound. But then moving on to comfort. So the comfort of these is where I have some serious problems. So the head strap is fine, no problems with it, the standard HiFiMan strap that's used on most of their headphones. But my problem with these, which I teased in the Verum review, which is sitting over here to the right, is this new HiFiMan headband that's used on the Sundara, the 560 V2 and V3, the HE6SE, and these. I think that's all it uses. If I'm missing one, I'm sorry, but they don't have any cup swivel. And what I mean by that is the cup doesn't articulate, you know, like left and right on like this axis. It doesn't do like that motion. And that's a problem, because if these don't sit on your seal on your face at the stock angle that they're at, you can't really twist the cup. Like that give is just like the frame, just like the little bit of give in the frame, because these do like a little bit of rattle in the build, despite them being all metal. But yeah, that really hurts comfort, and I really have a problem getting a seal on my head because like they're angled almost back. If you can see the angle, like the cups are almost angled backwards, and I get a kind of a gap on the front of my head, and I really have to play around with the positioning in order to, you know, get those to seal on my head correctly. And I don't know why you would make a headband that has no cup swivel. And you see, even on the Verums here, where, you know, the cups are also fixed on the yoke, he did that split on the headband so the cups can have some swivel. And I mean, HiFiMan, like, come on, that's pretty obvious. Why are you making a headband that has no swivel on the cups? Like, what? Like, who thought that was a good idea? Like, terrible design element. I wish HiFiMan would scrap this headband design and go back to something else. I really like the old design, the one that's still used on like the HE1000, the Arya, that was used on the Edition X. I wish they would have just kept that and made it metal. I don't know why they came up with this design. It's not needed, and it's not a good design. They should just, you know, just made the forks metal so they didn't snap, and gone back to the old design, because I'm not a fan of this design without the cup swivel. Okay, so now we have to talk about, you know, where these fall in their product lineup. So HiFiMan's product lineup right now is a little confusing. So they're fading out. The 400i is basically dead. They're still sold, but it's basically dead, replaced by the Sundara, which is now their entry-level planar. The 560 V2 and V3 are weird. They're technically only an Adorama exclusive for $299. These B-stock drivers, they're not the same as the 560 V1. I don't really recommend those. Those are the V2 and V3 I don't recommend. The V1's good, but don't get the V2 and V3. Those are pretty bad. So we have these are at $1,000 for the Ananda. We have the Ira, which is at $1,600. The HE6SE, which is at $1,800. They still have the HE1000 V2, which is at $3,000. The HE1000 SE at $3,500. The Sundara at $4,000. We have the Jade at $2,500. So yeah, their lineup right now is a little weird. So these technically are the replacement to the Edition X V2. And it's been a while since I've heard an Edition X, so I don't really feel comfortable making that direct comparison. But from memory, these sound similar, but I think they are improved a little bit over the Edition X V2. And I know you all are going to ask me to compare it to the Ira also. And I've only heard the Ira at Can Jam very briefly. I don't really feel comfortable making that comparison yet. The one thing I will say is the Ira definitely has more bass than these do. And they seemed a little bit harder to drive from my memory, but not as hard to drive as an HE1000. And I'm not sure about detail or the rest of the response curve. I haven't heard it long enough to tell you that. But yeah, so now we're going to go ahead and get on to the sound. Okay, so starting things off here at the low end. So I've seen a few different graphs of the Ananda here, and they all seem to have pretty wildly different bass response. Some seem to roll off a lot, some doesn't seem to roll off at all, some seems to have elevated bass. And I think the reason for that has to do with the sealing problem that I mentioned, which I think people are having trouble getting these to seal on their measurement rigs, which I think is what's causing the vast differences in the bass that people are measuring on these. And on my ears graph, which I had some problems with these seem to be one of those headphones that the ears doesn't like. Every once in a while you get a headphone that the ears gives you a really weird response, and you just have to kind of ignore it. I'm still going to post it, but I don't think this is going to be the most accurate graph. The Verum and the Iva seem more in line with what other people got, but my ears graph of these seems a little bit off. But anyway, so the sub bass on these, it goes pretty good. It seems to roll off a little bit at 30 or 40 hertz or so. It seems to roll off just a little bit, not as much as the Iva did here, but the Verum I think has better extension than the Ananda does. But that being said, these don't have bad sub bass extension. It just seems to roll off 3 or 4 dB to my ear at 30 or 40 hertz or so. So decent sub bass, but not perfectly flat planar. Now the interesting thing about these is these seem to have elevated mid bass a little bit. It seems like 100 to maybe 300 hertz or so seems to be elevated like 2 to 4 dB, somewhere around there, which is interesting because you usually don't see a planar with elevated mid bass. Planar bass is typically, or I don't like the term planar bass, but planars tend to have flat bass response. It seems to be pretty generally flat till about a 1K, and if it rolls off, it rolls off. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But these seem to have a little bit of an elevation from like 100 to 300 hertz or so, which is really interesting. You usually don't see planars that have mid bass that's elevated, and that makes them kind of fun and kind of different for a planar, and really interesting. And then the Ira also seems to have an elevation there, but I don't like I said, I didn't hear it long enough to necessarily confirm that, but that also seemed to have really good bass. But anyway, moving on. So the mid-range on these, it's a good mid-range, but as I mentioned in the Ira review, it follows that HiFiMan signature. So starting at around 1K, it starts to dip down a little bit. It seems to dip down, I'd say 4 to maybe 5 dB, and it seems to stay at a relatively consistent level until about 4.5 to 5K, where it starts to come back up once we get to the treble region to, more in line with the rest of the response. And so that gives these, a little bit dipped out mid-range, not really shouty, but it's not as bad as on the IVAs here. I don't think I emphasized enough in my IVA review that the problem with the mids on the IVA is more than just that they're dipped down. They also have some weirdness going on to them. They're not like the cleanest vocals. They're a little strange. The vocals on the Ananda are much better than on the IVA. They're not as dipped, and they're just not weird sounding. Someone else that I heard impressions of the IVA said that the mid sounded almost out of phase, which I think is fair. I wasn't really sure necessarily how to describe it on the IVA because it's kind of weird. But yeah, anyway, this is not about the IVA, it's about the Ananda. So moving on to the treble. The treble on these is, I would say it's a little bit elevated. It's not really bright, but it's a little higher than what I would say is a neutral treble response. It has, it's pretty quick, nice decay, decent sparkle, and, so these have kind of a V-shaped signature, a little bit dipped out in the mids, a little bit elevated bass, a little bit elevated treble, and it makes these pretty fun to listen to. Yeah. And then soundstage. So these don't seem very wide to me. The HE1000 has really nice wide stage. The Ananda never seemed to have wide soundstage to me. It seems a little wider than like a 650 or something like that. But these seem almost to have like the soundstage that the IVA does. Like a Lex, like a little bit wider than 650, but not like really wide. The Verum here definitely has wider soundstage than the Ananda does. And I'm not sure why that is, but I don't know if it's maybe I'm just not getting a seal or something. But yeah, these don't seem to have the soundstage that like an HE1000 does. And then when we move on to imaging, these image pretty well. Once again, nothing absolutely spectacular, but good imaging overall. Nothing to write home about, but it works. And then one more thing I want to say about these HiFiMans, these giant HiFiMans, like the HE1000, the Ira, stuff like that. These have a really interesting presence. Something about the driver being that large gives these a really interesting sound. And there's a track, it's a Yoshi Horikawa's Wondering. If you own any of these large driver HiFiMans, play that track, and these give like some of the most immersive experiences that I've heard in that particular song. It really sounds like you're there. It makes these kind of interesting for gaming just because of how large the driver is. It gives this really large presence to the sound and the environment, and makes these a lot of fun to listen to. But as I mentioned in my IVA review, the problem with the Ananda is it has pretty substantial compression. And the louder you crank these up, it seems to compress more. And you can see that in some people's graphs of these I've seen where they measure them. And at different levels, like the total harmonic distortion starts to increase and these compress. And it's like, and the compression and the total harmonic distortion is at like an abnormally high level. And I'm not sure why that is. Something to do with the driver design makes these compress a lot. Now, it doesn't ruin them by any means. They're still overall quite good. But if you listen really loud, these might really start to bother you with compression. But if you listen more at a normal volume, it shouldn't bother you that much. But yeah, that's just something I wanted to mention, and it's really strange that they do that. But anyhow, now we're going to move on here to a couple comparisons. So I think these are both fair comparisons here. They just happen to be the other two things that I've reviewed as of today. So the Ananda I would definitely take over the Verum. Not just because I like the signature more than the Verum, but these overall have more detail to me. But they also have very large drivers. The Verum has better stage, better extension, and I also honestly better dynamics. They don't compress quite as well, or not as well, quite as much. but the Ananda here has still more detail and better technical ability than the Verum does. And then I did say in my IVA review that I would take them over the Ananda, and personally I still would. I really do like these, but the mid-range on these is going to ruin them for a lot of people. The Ananda has better timbre than the IVA does for sure. This is a pretty typical HiFiMan timbre, particularly for the higher end stuff. The lower end HiFiMan stuff has kind of a different timbre in my opinion than the higher end stuff. But this is that typical higher end HiFiMan timbre that's overall pretty nice. I don't really have complaints with their timbre. But yeah, the IVA definitely has more air and better treble than the Ananda does. I'm getting these A's names confused. And these definitely are more comfortable. I think these are actually heavier. Yeah, I think I said these are 400 some odd grams. These weigh more than the Ananda, despite being much smaller. And also Chinese made. And I like the build on these more than on the Ananda. And I still recommend the IVA here for sure. But once again, if the mids on these ruin them for you, these are still very good. And I'm not sure why nobody seems to talk about these. These seem to be kind of a sleeper. Like, people almost pretend that they don't exist. And I've seen that the prices on these are starting to drop. The $1,000 MSRP, and I'm starting to see them for, I think HiFiMan, as of the time of filming, has these on their site for $850. I think I've seen them as low as $799 new. Used market, they seem to be going 700 and some change. I think I've seen one as low as $650. And yeah, for that price, definitely recommended. They're they're really good. The compression's a little weird, but yeah, I think these are a worthy successor to the Edition X V2. If you can try them before you buy them, definitely do, because you want to see if this comfort is going to bother you. Because for me, at least, it definitely does. I don't like that the cups don't swivel. But yeah, overall, really nice HiFiMan sound, and good bass. Kind of fun with that bump in the mid bass. The little bit dipped out mid range. So if you like shouty, not for you. A little bit elevated trebles, kind of a nice V-shaped signature, nice detail, nice timbre. Not very good stage, but yeah, definitely recommended. And I hope to see people talking about these more, because I'm not sure why they're not really talking about them much. I guess maybe the LCD2 Classics some people are going to compare them to. I'm not really going to make that comparison necessarily, because I haven't heard those long enough to say. The Alex, people are probably going to compare them to. I do have those, but that's kind of they're pretty wildly different. Dynamic versus really large planar. I don't really want to make that comparison. The LCD2 phasered cost the same as these. I think I probably would take that over these. I do want to hear that longer to definitely say that 100%. But yeah, I think I would take the 2Fs over these for $1,000. But these for cheaper, these are definitely a good option. Definitely take a look at these. So anyway, in conclusion, Ananda, really good headphone for $1,000. I'm not sure why people don't talk about them more. Take a look at them if you're shopping for higher end planars, particularly if you like something easier to drive, because like I said, easily driven off a phone. Good build, weird comfort, weird compression, but yeah, really good, really recommended. Nice cable sucks. You definitely want to get a new cable. But yeah, anyway, I hope you all enjoyed my review of the Ananda. I know some of you were asking me for a review of that thing. And yeah, thanks you guys for watching. Check out all my links to my stuff in the description, as well as the ears graph, Twitter, contact information, stuff like that. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Bye.